Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 8. Today, we're doing performance management. My friends, let's do this. So we're going to start off. These are our learning outcomes, if you'd like to read through them. Today, let's begin with performance management. Now, performance management is more than just a once-a-year formality. It is the art and science of creating conditions when people can truly thrive. The best organizations recognize that when people are empowered to do their best, they constantly, when they're empowered to do their best with consistency and with clarity, they become unstoppable. And that's the promise of a robust management system. And that's what we really want to thrive for. Now, performance reviews are tools within this system. Traditionally, they involve assessing how well employees met predefined criteria. However, however actually is that they often fall short when used in isolation. They risk becoming bureaucratic, they risk becoming demotivating or disconnecting from actual performance. That's why leading firms are reimagining the system. They integrate performance management with strategic priorities. Instead of being reactive, they take a proactive stand, setting goals, aligning expectation, and embedding feedback loop. Now, it's critical to see that there is a living process. Performance management isn't a statistic document, it's actually a dynamic dialogue. The question isn't, how did you do? But also, how can we help you grow? That shift in mindset, that right there is transformative, and that's where transformation actually begins. The figure here, it outlines the cyclical continuation or continuous performance management process that aligns individuals' contribution with organizations' goals. Step 1, setting goals that connect to higher objectives is crucial. If employees don't understand how their work ladders up to the company's mission, motivation, or direction, if they don't see how it actually measures up, it can actually make them almost deterring in their performance. Step 2 you want to do is involving defining behavioral expectation. So there must be clear, measurable, and relevant. Without alignment here, you create confusion, and people may work hard but not necessarily work smart. The standard setting process also helps reduce subjectivity, which is a common pitfall in performance assessment. Step 3, that's where the real magic happens, and that is ongoing feedback. Now, this step is too often skipped in traditional systems. Frequent feedback, what it does is it closes the loops between effort and outcome, helping people stay on track and engaged. It allows for a quicker intervention before issues escalate. Now, looking at step 4 and 5, this is when we have the evaluation and the review. By noting the sequencing feedback, the sequencing feedback comes first, and this approach reflects a shift away from punitive assessment to a coaching culture. Finally, step 6 involves making HR decisions based on full understanding of both performance and of potential. There are two major categories of purpose for performance reviews. One is developmental and 2 is administrative. Let's start with the developmental side. Reviews provide feedback. It highlights strengths and weaknesses, and it serves as a forum for setting goals, setting these future goals. When done right, this is a motivational and empowering experience for the employee. Development process, it also increases an individual's capacity. They identify training needs, uncover growth opportunities, and improve communication. A good review should feel like coaching session, not a sentencing. It should help the employees understand that they are where they are and where they need to go and how to get there. Now, let's look at the administrative side. Reviews help with HR planning, who gets promoted, who needs more support, and yes, who may not be a fit. They also serve legal and organizational functions like documenting decisions, evaluating training outcomes, and allocating rewards. But here's the kicker. When performance reviews focus solely on administrative outcomes, they lose motivational power. Employees start to see them as judgmental, not developmental. The goal should be to balance both purposes and to make sure employees feel seen, heard, and supported. Performance reviews often fail not because the concept is flawed, but because the execution is flawed. First, let's talk about preparation, or lack of it. Managers frequently enter review conversations with minimal thought, basing evaluations on vague impressions or recent events. This creates a capability or credibility gap. Employees can sense when a review isn't rooted in observation, detail, data, or fairness, and it erodes the trust system. Another common issue is the lack of clarity around goals. So if employees begin a performance period without a well-defined measurable objective, it is impossible to assess the success meaningfully. This lack of alignment results in confusion, it results in frustration, and ultimately, it results in disagreement. It's like being graded on an exam you didn't know that you were taking. Subjective bias is another major pitfall. Now, human perception is riddled with error, like the halo effect, where one strong trait skews the entire evaluation. Or when you have political bias, where personal relationships interfere with objective decision making. These biases not only harm morale, but they also perpetuate inequality within an organization. Then there's the issue of timing. Now, annual reviews are often too infrequent to be useful. They miss the nuances of real-time performance, and they reduce feedback to a retroactive conversation. Without regular check-ins, employees may feel blindsided, resentful during formal reviews, especially when they learn about issues long after they occur. And perhaps most critical, there is no follow-up. A review without coaching is like a diagnosis without treatment. If there's no plan to grow and support, what's the point? The effective performance system must close the loop with actionable development plans and regularly touch points to ensure progress is being made. A truly effective performance management system isn't just built on HR in a silo. It must be co-created across departments and align with strategic goals. HR may oversee the framework, but the real impact comes from managers on the ground, those who work closely with the employees and can actually translate high-level objectives into day-to-day interactions. This collaboration development process, it actually enhances both the credibility and the commitment. When managers help define performance standards and anticipate in their enforcement, or participate rather in their enforcement, they're more likely to champion the system because they're actually involved in it. And so this involvement ensures that what they get measured is actually relevant to the work being done and meaningful to the employee's success. But this isn't just about management buy-in. Employee participation is designing the system. Sorry, I feel like I need to breathe. All right. As we were saying, it's not about management buy-in, but actually employee participation in designing the system leads to stronger engagement. When people feel ownership of how they are evaluated, they're more likely to see the system as fair and supportive, not punitive. That sense of agency fosters intrinsic motivation, which is far more powerful than fear or external pressure. Another critical point here is alignment with company strategy. Every component of the system, from goals to evaluation, should trace back to the broader organizational objective. Performance management becomes a strategic lever, not just an administrative chore. So it ensures that everyone is rowing this in the same direction. Finally, the system must be agile. The business landscape is evolving rapidly, and it has this rigid system that becomes really outdated very quickly. So companies must build feedback loops into their performance processes. Performance standards are a foundation of any fair and effective evaluation system. They must be grounded in actual job. Deprived from a thorough job analysis reflected in the job description and linked to the organization's broader strategy. Without this foundation, performance reviews become arbitrary and inconsistent. One of the best tools for setting standards is SMART goal framework. What we're looking at is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. SMART goals reduce ambiguity and give employees clear targets. So when you're specific about your success or what your success looks like, people are more likely to achieve it. Vague goals like improved communications are hard to act on, but respond to all team emails within 24 hours. Hey, that is a concrete and measurable thing. So, measurability also supports fairness and transparency. If you can quantify an outcome, like sale close, customer satisfaction rating, or project completion time, you can reduce the chances of bias creeping into evaluation. People can see how they're doing and adjust in real time. Moreover, realistic and achievable goals foster psychological safety. Setting people up to fail is demotivating, and it could be, or it is, not just could be, but it is very counterproductive. Performance standards should stretch people, not break them. They should balance challenge and support, pushing people to grow without overwhelming them. And what you don't want to forget is time-based. And that time-based element means that deadlines are created with urgency and focus, helping employees prioritize their efforts. When goals are open-ended, they often get deprioritized. So what you want to do is make things time-bound to anchor performance to specific outcomes and keep the system moving forward. This figure visually illustrates the complexity involved in creating valid, fair, and reliable performance measurements. Now, at the core is the zone of valid assessment, the sweet spot where performance measures are actually strategically relevant, free from contamination, and comprehensive enough to avoid deficiencies. By reaching that zone, reaching that zone actually requires very careful designs. Let's break it down. One, criteria contamination, and that refers to measuring factors that don't actually reflect performance. Things like favoritism, mood of the mood of the evaluator, or office politics. So for example, you have an employee that might receive low rating because of their work. That would be fair, but if they're not receiving it because of their work, they might be receiving it because of the disagreement with their manager. Now that is contamination. So that kind of contamination skews the data and undermines the trust in the system. On the flip side, criteria deficiency. This happens when performance standards don't capture the full scope of what an employee actually does. Maybe you're not measuring sales, but not customer satisfaction. In that case, you're missing crucial aspect of the performance, and employees may ignore important but unmeasured behaviors. So they may ignore the customer satisfaction and focus just on sales. The next thing is strategic relevance, and this is essential. So every performance standard should be tied back to organization's goal. If your company values innovation, but your performance metrics only reward speed and volume, you're creating a misalignment. Employees will chase the metric you reward, not necessarily the behavior that you follow. So you have to be very cognizant of that. And then there's reliability, the consistency of your measurement across time and raters. Without reliability, your system is fragile. If two different managers give the same employees vastly different ratings, the system loses credibility. That's why calibration, which we'll discuss shortly, is so important. So it ensures that everyone or every evaluating performance is based on the same expectation. Now, in this slide, we examine the three major issues affecting performance strategy. So we're looking at strategic relevance, criteria deficiency, and criteria examination, and this is what we talked about earlier. You can feel free to go through these things, but very quickly. Criterion deficiency is, strategic relevance. That's where we're starting. It ensures that what you're measuring truly reflects the organization's mission and values. Criterion deficiency is about blind spots. So if you only measure easily quantifiable outcomes like units produced or tickets closed, you might ignore harder to measure but equally important contributions. And finally, criterion contamination, which introduces irrelevant factors into performance assessment. So reliability, one of the most overlooked but critical aspects of performance evaluation. Reliability speaks to the consistency and stability of your standards over time and across evaluators. The system is only as strong as its ability to produce fair and repeatable results. There are two kinds of reliability to watch for. The first one is intra-rater reliability, which measures whether one manager is consistent in how they rate people over time, and sorry, and inter-rater reliability, which checks whether different management apply the same standards across to their team. So low reliability is a red flag. It means that your process is vulnerable to subjective and biases. This is why many organizations implement calibrations. Now, calibrations, these are structured conversations where managers come together to align on what constitutes excellent, average, and needs improvement performance. It creates a shared language and a common understanding, reduces variability, and ensuring employees are evaluated fairly no matter who their manager is. Now, calibration also encourages accountability. It forces managers to justify their ratings and reflect on whether they're doing too lenient or too harsh of a job. Now, even the most technically sound performance management system will fail if it is perceived as unfair or too cumbersome to use. Let's start with fairness. Now, this is about justice, transparency, and impartiality. Now, if the employees believe that the process is based on lack of clarity, they'll view the system as punitive rather than constructive. Acceptability, on the other hand, it refers to how easy and intuitive the system is for use, so both for the manager and for the employees. A system that requires extensive paperwork, confusing form, or time-consuming meeting is one that is unlikely to gain traction. People will avoid using it or engage only superficially with it, which defeats the entire purpose. Fairness is hinged on consistency, so employees should see the similar behavior and rewards are correlated in the same way. Now, regardless of who the employee is or who the manager is. When similar performance leads to different outcomes, it signals favoritism or bias, which destroys credibility. It's also essential that employees understand how their evaluations are derived. If they can't see the connection between their action and the feedback they received, they become cynical or disengaged, and that's not what we want for them. Legal compliance and performance reviews is non-negotiable. Organizations must ensure that their review systems are grounded in objective, job-related criteria. This begins with solid job analysis that clearly defines performance standards based on actual responsibilities, not vague impressions or formal expectations. Employees must be informed of these standards ahead of time. Transparency is critical not only for fairness but also for legal defensibility. If an employee doesn't know what's expected of them, they can't fairly be evaluated, and any disciplinary action based on that evaluation could be challenged in court. So we have to make sure that there's legalities in this. And so you can take a look at these legal outcomes as well. Traditionally, performance reviews came solely from an employee's supervisor, but that's no longer sufficient in complex collaborative workplace. Now, performance feedback is actually increasingly gathered from a variety of sources. You've got peers, you've got subordinates, you've got customers, and even employees themselves. This is known as the multi-source feedback, and it's designed to create a fuller, more accurate picture of the performance. Now, each source offers unique insight that could be relevant to understanding who this employee is. And so the drawback or the challenge is that there can be conflicting feedback, especially if the relationships are strained. So for example, top performers might frustrate peers by being overly assertive, even though their outcome or output is actually pretty excellent. It's the manager's job to interpret the feedback in context and separate personality conflicts from legitimate performance concerns. So here we see the difference from which performance reviews information can be gathered. Each of these plays a distinct role in putting a more fuller picture of the employee's performance. So relying solely on the manager perspective, that's not something we want to do anymore. There's more to it than that. And as we said earlier in this slide, it comes from different places. So let's put it all together. The 360-degree evaluation is the integration of all of these perspectives we just discussed. So managers, peers, subordinates, self, and sometimes customers. It's called 360 degrees because it covers the full circles of employees' work ecosystem. The goal is not to overwhelm, but to provide a well-rounded, balanced perspective on how individuals is performing from a single angle. This approach is especially valuable in leadership development. Now, a manager might think that they're effective communicators because they hold regular meetings, but subordinates might feel those meetings are one-sided or unclear. A 360 a 360 would reveal these blind spots. In fact, one of the most powerful outcomes of the 360 evaluation is the uncovering gaps between the intention and the impact. The success of this 360 system actually depends on how it is implemented. Being anonymous, is important to ensure honest feedback. So it must be balanced with accountability and constructive framing. Training is essential to both those who are giving and receiving feedback. Without it, the process can actually feel more like an ambush rather than a personal development opportunity. And that's not what we want. We want people to actually grow. So here you can see some of the pros and the cons of the 360-degree reviews, and you can take a closer look at them. We've talked about the majority of them earlier on as well. So one of the most critical but frequently overlooked elements of the effective performance management is training appraisers. And so a brilliant performance review framework means nothing if people administering it aren't equipped to use it correctly. Without proper training, well-intentioned manager can provide inaccurate, biased, and demoralizing feedback. Now here we emphasize a little bit of a hard truth. Many performance review programs fail because raters simply don't know how to evaluate performance. And so that's what we have to get better at. A really good thing to do is establishing a review plan and professionalizing this process. So managers need to understand why behind the why behind the review system, not just what to do, but what we're trying to achieve. It's designed to promote growth. Is it designed to align goals, to support succession planning? These philosophical foundations help appraisers adopt the right tone and purpose during evaluations. Now, next, appraisers must be trained in the mechanics of the systems. This includes understanding the rating scales, how to document performance over time, how to prepare for conversations, and how to structure feedback. Training covers setting SMART goals, conducting difficult conversations with empathy, and providing or avoiding common rating errors like halo effect, recency bias, or central tendencies. All right. So distributional rating errors, which is a particularly critical problem in performance evaluations because it obscures individuals' differentiation. The error of central tendency occurs when raters play it safe by rating most employees as average. This could stem from the desire to avoid conflict or lack clarity about performance differences. It's essential to punish high performance. What it essentially does, it Goodness. All right. What it essentially does is that it punishes high performers and inflates the performance of underperformers. So it leads to disengagement and lack of accountability. The second form is lenient or strictness error, which is equally as damaging. And here, managers who consistently rate too high are often trying to be nice or avoid conversations. On the other hand, those who are overly strict may think they're holding high standards, but instead they may be demoralizing their team. Both distort organizational data use for promotion, compensation, and development planning. So, why do these errors occur? Actually, let's take a look before we go through that. One reason is the absence of clear behavioral anchors or rubrics. So managers don't have objective standards. They fall back on instinct or on bias. So continuing on with distributional error, what we're looking at is first, when you explain to the raters that variability is expected, especially in large workforces, you help them understand that uniformity isn't realistic. Next, you want to use anchors, which are defined descriptions of what behaviors at various points on the scale look like, and that's pivotal. Anchors bring objectivity to an inherent subjective process. So, for example, instead of saying someone is good at communication, you list specific behaviors like active listening and asking clarifying questions in a team meeting. The next thing is forced distribution, which can be controversial. So while it enforces differentiation, it can also breed competition and discourage collaborations. Now, organizations must balance the benefits of identifying top talent with potential for demotivation. You want to use this carefully, and if you do, it may or may not ensure that everyone is labeled above average. So you want to use it carefully, but you want to make sure that they are not um, uh, labeled as, goodness, I forgot what I was saying, as above average. Right, peer ranking offers another solution. So, especially when individuals work closely in teams, employees may be hesitant to rate each other, but with proper training and anonymity, peer insight can actually offer rich data. They help uncover relational dynamics and team contributions that managers might miss as a result of it. Temporal errors, which relate to how time affects a rater's judgment. So recency error is one of them, and it's the most common and problematic. So if an employee performs exceptionally well in the last month before the review, a manager might forget mediocre performance from earlier month in the year. Also works if there's a recent mistake as well. The constant error occurs when employees is rated in comparison to another rather than against the subjective standards. So, for instance, an average performance might be rated poorly if they follow an exceptional one. And finally, the similar to me error involves unconscious bias. Managers may rate people who remind them of themselves more favorably, and that's not something we want to do. Feedback training is arguably the most important part of preparing for appraisers. And so technical training can be fixed with system, but how the managers communicate feedback determines whether the employees accept it and uses it. Now, communication isn't just about delivering a message, it's engaging in a dialogue. And managers must be trained to invite reactions, listen attentively, and respond with empathy and clarity. The second piece, which is diagnosing the root causes of performance issues, is overlooked. Poor performance might stem from inadequate resources, unclear expectation, personal challenges, or misalignment with role fit. So simply pointing out the problem without exploring the cause is ineffective and potentially harmful. Third, goal setting is essential. So feedback without a forward plan lacks utility. Goals should be co-created and based on the SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Now, performance reviews, when structured thoughtfully, serve as a powerful tool for development, alignment, and accountability. This slide laid out the three overarching category of review methods. These are trait-based, behavior-based, and result-based. Trait-based evaluates inherent characteristics such as initiative, dependability, or leadership potential. And so while it can provide insight into an employee's natural tendencies, it's the least actionable and often the most subjective. Traits are often abstract and without behavioral evidence. They may reflect personal bias more than reality. The behavioral approach is more focused on what employees actually do. It evaluates the observable actions and decision making, offering a clearer link to job responsibilities. The result-oriented approach that we are looking at, it looks at measurable impact of an employee work, sales number, project completions, client satisfactions, and so forth. The challenge lies in choosing the right mix. So not just one of them, the right mix. For roles requiring innovation and relationship building, behavioral reviews might be more relevant. In performance-driven environments, result-based assessment is key, and for development planning, trait-based assessment might offer more value. Now let's take a deeper dive into trait methods. You've got the graphic rating scale method, which is widely used because of simplicity. It assigns numerical or descriptive ratings along the scales for specific traits like punctuality, communication, or leadership. However, its subjective nature can lead to inconsistencies unless well-defined anchors are provided. Mixed, excuse me? Mixed standard scale methods build on this by asking the rater to compare employees to standard level of performance. Each trait is rated as better than, equal to, or worse than the standards. This adds some nuances and forces refers to make more deliberate judgment. Forced choice method attempts to eliminate bias by having raters choose from statements that are all somewhat positive, but only one is the most accurate. It's harder to gain, and it produces leniency or halo effect. However, it can be frustrating to raters to feel limited by the option. The easy method is open-ended and allows raters to write qualitative commentaries on employee performances. While this can be incredibly rich and personal, it actually lacks structure and can be difficult to compare across employees and time-consuming. So still, it offers narrative depth and numeric methods. That numeric methods often they lack. And so this is for the essay method. I think for some reason in my head I said easy. It's not easy, it's the essay. Okay, obviously, as you guys can see. All right. Behavioral methods shift focus from who the employee is and what the employee does. The critical incident method is a strong example. Now, managers keep running record of notable actions, positive or negative, throughout the review period. This avoids the pitfall of recency bias and provides specific data to discuss during evaluations. However, it requires discipline and consistency from the manager. The behavioral checklist method simplifies this by providing a list of behaviors rather than that the rater can actually check off. And then we have the behavioral observation scale, which is also referred to as BOS. And that can take it a step further by asking how frequently an employee performs or behavior, not just whether they do it. Okay, so this adds quantitative dimension to a behavioral review. And if used consistency, the BOS can actually provide trends over time and serve as an excellent coaching tool. The behaviorally anchored rating scale, the BARS, is probably one of the most sophisticated behavioral tools. It combines elements of traditional rating scales with specific behavioral elements or anchors at each level. For example, a 5 on a customer service might say, always greets customers with a smile, uses their name, and follows up within 24 hours. This provides the raters with concrete examples, removing any ambiguity. What makes the BARS particularly valuable is that it builds from the ground up using critical incident job analysis. Now, experts and stakeholders identify key behaviors that define success in the role. These behaviors are then categorized and placed along performance continuum. This ensures that the scale is relevant and defensible. The BARS reduces subjectivity and increases inter-rater reliability because everyone is using the same language and the same criteria. When we think about evaluating performance, one of the most strategic approaches to measure is results. So, what the employees actually has accomplished. Unlike trait or behavioral methods, result methods focus on separately or squarely on outcomes. So, sales productivity and quality measures is one of them. These metrics directly tie to an employee's performance and tangible business results. Management by objective, so MBO, emerges as the most holistic approach, and MBO encourages collaboration between managers and employees to set goals that are clear, measurable, and mutually agreed upon. And then the last one we have is the balanced scorecard, and it goes even further. So, developed by Kaplan and Norton, this framework revolutionizes performance management by introducing multidimensional perspective. It incorporates four categories: financial performance, customer satisfaction, internal process, and learning and growth. And the way it works is that it prevents tunnel vision on profits and ensures that the development, innovation, and operational efficiencies are also considered. Mhm. And the figure just has a visual representation of the MBO process. All right. So continuing on, here we see a comparative chart of trait methods, behavior methods, and result methods, and some of their advantages and disadvantages as well. The performance review meetings is not just this administrative ritual. It's actually a strategic touchpoint that can make or break employees' morale and future performances. So the effectiveness of this meeting depends on how well prepared both parties are. And that's why scheduling the session well in advance, typically 10 days to 2 weeks, is crucial. This allows the employees to gather thoughts, review accomplishment, engage in self-reflection, and managers to prepare thoughtful, data-driven feedback. And that is something very, very important. There are three types of feedback that we're going to look at, or feedback sessions: tell and sell, tell and listen, and problem solving. Tell and sell is more directive, and the manager comes in with a clear message and aims to challenge behavior using persuasive techniques. This method is effective when quick behavioral change is needed, but can breed defensiveness if not handled delicately. Tell and listen is more exploratory, and it opens the floor for employees to express their side of the initial feedback. Problem solving is probably the most ideal for developmental context. So it encourages collaboration and shared accountability, empowering the employee to take ownership of their improvement. And each of these formats actually requires a different set of skills. So great leaders know when to switch modes based on context and individuals in front of them. There's no formula that guarantees successful reviews, but there are principles that drastically improve the odd. Start by asking for a self-evaluation. This signals to the employee that their voice matters and encourage honest reflections. Invite participation by asking questions like, what do you feel most proud of this quarter? Where do you see growth and opportunities for yourself? And you want to look at appreciation, and it's critical. So start the meeting by acknowledging their wins. You want to look at support. So this means offering resources, suggesting a mentor, or even just checking in regularly. And follow up, where performance doesn't improve because one meeting, it improves because of what happens between the meetings. And that's something that should be standard all the time. Improvement is what we're looking at now. And so when employees underperform, the instinctive reaction might be to assume it's a motivation issue, but that's often a superficial diagnosis. The first thing we must recognize is that performance is multidimensional. It arises from a combination of ability, motivation, and environment. Without carefully dissecting which component is at fault, any solution we apply will be ineffective or worse, demoralizing. What we want to do really is just tackle the main issues, and that is identifying the source. Performance diagnosis, you want to think about it as conducting a system analysis. You're looking for breakdowns. Is it that the employee doesn't know how to do something? Or is it that they don't want to do it? Or perhaps they can't because the system, the tools, or the team may be dysfunctional. Another thing we have is managing ineffective performance. So here the solution must match the problem. For ability-related issues, training or mentorship is appropriate. For motivation issues, it may be time to re-examine incentives, recognition systems, or even the job role itself. And for environmental problems, such as toxic team or outdated software, requires organizational, not individuals, intervention. And finally, focus on changing the behavior, not the person. Too many managers personalize performance feedback, unintentionally attacking employees' character or identity. And that is not what we want to do. You want to always separate the who from the what. The goal is to help someone develop, not to shame them into submission. Feedback should feel like a bridge and not a wall. And that's something very, very, very important that I cannot stress enough. So here we're looking at the framework for thinking systematically about performance. First, ability. So include the techniques and technical and interpersonal skills, problem solving, and even physical limitations. These are relatively stable over time, but can be enhanced with training. Motivation is more dynamic. It fluctuates with job satisfaction, goal alignment, perception of fairness, and relationship with coworkers. Then we have environment, and that is the ecosystem surrounding the employee. So you can hire the most skilled and driven individuals, but if they're handed broken tools, unclear policies, or ambiguous job roles, their performance will suffer. This right here is a diagnostics a matrix, is where the rubber meets the road. So at the top, we have competency measures, which evaluate the can-do aspect of the performance, knowledge, technical skills, and cognitive ability. So if an employee shows low competency, your response should be immediate, training, coaching, or reassignment. In the middle, we see behavioral measures, so influences both ability and motivation. So if someone has a skill set but isn't demonstrating the behavior, it's likely a motivation issue. And so what you're looking at is interventions here should be coaching, re-engagement strategies, and clarifying goals. At the bottom are result measures, which encompass all three factors: ability, motivation, and environment. So if someone behaves appropriately but isn't achieving result, you might need to dig into situational factors. Is the market down? Is the product flawed? Is their role misaligned? Sometimes performance failures isn't about the individuals, but about poor organizational alignment. All right, my friends, that is it for today. Thank you so much for hanging in with me as we went through chapter 8. There we go. And we talked about performances and performance management. Thank you guys for being here, and I will be with you in the next video. Bye for now.